5-Strike Final, JCM Jones from the Mothership with Pfizer running through him. Joe Patrick, 19.9 the game with Moderna running through him. Joe, how are we feeling?
I'm good. Thanks to Kurt for Kurt.
I was gonna get there.
I've already screwed it up. Okay. Well, yeah. Sorry,
and also Kurt Castle on the intro with Chances. We've been meaning to mention Kurt every episode. We've written it down. Haven't done it. I blame not having the vaccine on that. Sam. But now that we're like one shot in, we've got this. And thanks, Kurt.
Say it was like, remind me to mention Kurt. Remind me to mention Kurt, and that was just on top of my head. So thank you, Kurt, for the intro. But yeah, got the vaccines running through us. I was did not expect to get the jab last week, but got it on Thursday. And Sam,
I'm excited for when you can tell your story, because your story is the best vaccine story. We'll hold on to that. That's a tease.
It was wild.
A year from now. Hang with us.
Yeah, we need to be with us. The dust needs to settle on all of this first. But once it does.
But good news, folks. If you haven't heard already, on Thursday, everyone is eligible for the vaccine. Please go get your vaccine. If you are an adult in Georgia, you will be eligible on Thursday, which means we're one step closer to getting 100% capacity back in Mercedes-Benz Stadium. I saw where the Braves are doing 33% capacity. That might be an indication of what we're looking forward to for the first Atlanta United game. But still, either way, go get it. We're close. We're getting there. And we're almost getting to the beginning of the season. While we're talking, the MLS schedule may come out. The full one, the big one, might actually come out, 3.5 weeks before.
We've been delaying doing this episode for days because, we've been expecting out the Alan Franco news. We're not expecting it, but just trying to wait for it to drop, and it hasn't dropped. And then, of course, now that we've decided to do it, we might get a schedule dropping on us literally while we're recording. I kind of hope it does drop while we record so we can react to it a little bit. But if not, I'm sure it will be out, obviously, by the time you guys are listening to this or watching us on YouTube. So yeah, fun stuff.
Lots of like weird things to kind of wonder about that. I wonder if they're still going to try to keep it very regional at first, or what the deal is, which is probably why they've been taking so long to get that out, but should be out soon. Keep an eye out for that. Keep an eye out as well for the stuff we have going on Patreon. Ryan Catney's our latest interview, the former Atlanta United digital media person, digital media savant for Atlanta United. It was great to talk to him for a little bit. He had a bunch of great stories from behind the scenes at Atlanta United. We've also got our daily shows running, which are not quite daily yet. Will be more daily as media availability becomes more of a regular occurrence. But our latest is up with interviews with Santiago Sosa and Anton Walks. And folks, a special announcement. We have a very special guest next week on the Patreon. The captain is back for round 2. Michael Parkhurst will be here to talk to us and talk to you. He answers a bunch of your questions as well. We
fantastic interview. Amazing. Yes, I cannot wait for everybody to hear it.
He's always so honest. He's always so candid. And he was able to kind of dig into a few things about last year, a few things about this year. And we're really looking forward to y'all getting to listen to that. Go check us out. Go check our Twitter for our Patreon link. Go check everything of that. We have some big things going on. Atlanta United has some big things going on too. And we'll get to them right now in business time. It's business. It's business time. Someone requested us so we sing that this time. I think it's in the YouTube comments. So there you go. I don't think that's going to be on the actual show, but we did it.
It'll be on the YouTube show, so problem solved.
Business time, Joe Patrick, and the first piece of business is maybe the biggest piece of business. Atlanta United back in for Alan Franco. Apparently,
this story, man, this is one of the crazier ones I've ever seen. I feel like the MLS transfer sagas are even crazier than transfer sagas you would see in Europe or something like that, because of all the rules that these teams are locked into. And so it makes them, especially in this case, kind of arrange these very specific deals that have certain parameters around them. Of course, this one is the whole 50% clause, and then the other 50% is like, well, when is Atlanta United going to pay? Like, what triggers would cause that? I think that's what these teams are obviously trying to sort out, and I don't think that Independiente really likes that situation. They just want the lump sum. They'll take the 20% off for the full lump sum of the lotto winnings. So That's what they report. What was reported happened with Sao Paulo was that Sao Paulo had reportedly bid 4 million, and this was crazy because this is being reported by Cesar Luis Merlo, who does, and another reporter at Teise Sports, and they don't typically report things that are not 100% factual, but this one appears not to have been. It just didn't really smell right from the time. If you're in the Discord, if you're a Patreon patron here, you will have heard me. I was kind of skeptical about this that night, just kind of learning more about this reporting. It just didn't really pass the smell test. And then there was reports from, or somebody had linked to a Sao Paulo blog where the bloggers were like, we don't have this kind of money, or not a blog, I'm sorry, like a message board. And people were like, we don't have this kind of money. And yeah, so it never made sense. Clearly seemed like just a pure media ploy negotiating on Twitter by these teams. And then I think Atlanta kind of pushed back by saying, all right, we're moving on to other targets. And then, of course, 24 hours later, the deal was back on, and Alan Franco's on his way here. Of course, that wasn't necessarily the end of the story, but
it's amazing how like sitcom childish some of it is. Well, you tell Sao Paulo that I say, it's stuff like that. It's interesting how that kind of comes through in the media, because when you think about it, it is kind of like especially with MLS stuff, it is like a big game of telephone going through like a couple of different languages, like the primary sources for these things are generally with the Argentine clubs, with things like that. And it's going through multiple people, and so when stuff is normally confirmed by people like Cesar Merlo and stuff like that, you can usually feel pretty good about it. But it's been so weird with this one. It's all been a big saga with center back. It's been such a mess. And just when we thought we were getting to the end, it looks like Alan Franco has tested positive for COVID-19. So, just throw that one into the pile.
Yeah, just a little, that cherry on top, icing on the cake of this transfer deal. One other thing that I heard that was kind of a discussion point around this, and I think there may have been some confusion, was around the agent involved on the side of Independiente, or was it Alan Franco's agent? So the deal is that Independiente has an agent that represents the club and helps negotiate these deals. That was the same agent that was obviously with Independiente 3 years ago or 4 years ago, whenever it was that Atlanta was negotiating for the sale of Ezequiel Barco. And of course, in that one, we saw a kind of a very similar thing happen right at the end of that transfer, where it was, if you cast your minds back, the deal was agreed to, and we were all just kind of watching the games. And then I think Barco scored a penalty in one of the games. I can't remember if it was the Copa Sudamericana final or the semifinal, but he scored. And then after that, it was like, okay, the price is going up for him. And there was a bunch of shenanigans right at the end of that transfer too. And so that was the same agent, at least from what I've heard, same agent that was representing Independiente, not the player, but Independiente in both occasions. And so also kind of a funny thing was Ezequiel Barco, and that transfer, he ended up paying for a training field to be installed or something at Independiente. It'll be interesting to see if Alan Franco donates out of the goodness of his own heart to, pay back the club that helped give him this opportunity. But either way, good deal for Atlanta United, I think, in the end, because you're getting in a player who's overall valued higher than Lautaro Giannetti was valued at, higher than David Martinez was valued at. I mean, if you look at Transfer Market, I think transfermarket.us, I think his transfer value, Alan Franco's, was over 8 million. So this 2.8 million that you're paying for the first 50%, and then you can add on to your share after that, is a good deal. I mean, you're getting a really good player in, and you're, staying under the under compliance of MLS rules.
Yeah, like we mentioned, all things considered, this is really not a worst case scenario. I know it's the third choice necessarily, but it's not a worst case scenario at all. And I kind of keep coming back to that thing we mentioned last week about Lautaro Giannetti being a plus because he had familiarity with the system, but Franco may just simply be the better player long term. Now, we don't want to jinx anything. There's still apparently a ways to go with this. It could change. We know this at this point. Lower your expectations. Be pleasantly surprised if this does actually go through. It seems like it will.
Hopefully he doesn't have any surgeries in his past.
Messed up grafts, things like that. I do want to comment real quickly, though, on just like the general reporting of it a while back. We had an interview with MLSsoccer.com's Tom Bogert, Tommy Scoops, as they call him. Go check that out. The episode is entitled New Signings at Atlanta United. It's on January 25th. It's in your feed. Go check that out. It was towards the end of the episode. He had a lot of great thoughts on how the reporting for these things work, how the processes work, and how journalists go through and manage when they're being used, essentially, when they're being used by agents, when they're used by teams to maybe bump the price up and things like that. It's a lot of discretion on their part. And generally, there are certain people you can trust, Tom being one of them. So hopefully that's honestly the last we have to worry about any transfers this year, I think. I think that might be the end of it for at least a little while. I
think somebody asked about it. I think we'll touch on a little bit more. I think there may be some questions about what we might do midseason, but yeah, for now, I mean, I think this will be the group that this team goes with for the majority of the season, at least. So good. Once that gets announced, we'll have everything behind us and ready to roll here.
And the team's set. And honestly, it looks pretty good. I mean, if you look at where this team was right when PT left last season, and it was just such a disaster, they've undeniably gotten better, I think. And that's all you could really ask for. They've undeniably gotten better. The system looks decent. We'll get to that in a second. And theoretically, this is going to be a year that gets Atlanta back to a good place. Maybe not the best place, maybe not 2018, but a good place nonetheless. They'll have to do it, though, without Glassy, Joe Patrick. Stephen Glass heads to Aberdeen FC to become their new manager. Of course, he's a former player there. I think his first team was Aberdeen. So he goes back there. Correct. That relationship continues between Atlanta United and Aberdeen FC. And Joe, you got to interact with them way more than I did because I was pretty checked out towards the end of last year. And obviously you've covered him with the twos as well. Any thoughts on Glass leaving?
I always enjoyed, working with Stephen Glass. Just a very professional guy. There were reports about this move happening a few weeks ago, and I didn't really put much thought into it. I just figure, it makes sense, right? If you're from Aberdeen, you're thinking, who would be our next manager? Well, our club has a relationship with Atlanta United. He played here. Makes total sense. That is probably why it ended up happening. But then when we talked to Jackson Conway a couple of weeks ago, he was like, I think he let slip a little bit. He was like, I hope he stays, which signaled to me that he was in the middle of, making a decision about this. So, good for him. As much as I hate to say it, it just felt like the Atlanta United experience was kind of a dead end for him after what happened last year. Like, he got a great opportunity to be the interim coach and to kind of show what he could provide another team. But then when a situation where you are then going back to the twos, I could totally see why you would want the motivation might be gone or have changed and you just want a different project.
That's not even lateral. That's backwards,
Yeah.
And backwards moves are no good. I get it. I'm not sure I quite understand it from Aberdeen's perspective, other than he's a former player who does have some kind of credibility.
Yeah.
He definitely was a manager of Atlanta United at one point. And I wish him the best. It's just kind of it's an interesting thing, I think, is all I'm going to say. Well, I'll be interested. Maybe he gets his control of things. Obviously last year was a very different situation for him. He had to kind of tailor what he was doing with an eye towards next year because Atlanta obviously punted pretty soon after Frank de Boer left. So he had to retweak a lot of things. We haven't actually seen Stephen Glass, the manager, I don't think.
Right. Yeah. I mean, just to be bluntly honest, Atlanta United was not good last year under him. Like, the results were not good, and the statistical measurements that you would take were not, didn't show Atlanta to be anything more than what their record showed. But again, exactly what you said. To be fair to him, it's like he didn't train this team from preseason. It wasn't like his team really. He was just trying to keep. He was kind of the emergency person you take out of coach to come fly the plane because the pilots passed out or something. So he did, and he landed the plane, he did as best he could. So hopefully that, now that he has more control over everything that's going on at Aberdeen, he can have a lot more success, and I hope he has it.
Stephen Glass was standing in a boat that's already underwater in Lake Lanier and had a tiny pail and was trying to shovel water out of said boat, So we'll see.
He was like, he took over the shipping vessel in the Suez Canal. I was like, hey, turn this around. Turn this around. Because that's the position that Lenny. That's the position that Lenny and I was in when he took over, just stuck sideways.
Imagine doing just such a sick ass drift that you block 10% of the world's trade. That rules. That rules. Look at that picture of that boat in the middle of a canal. It's awesome. It's awesome. Shout out St. Simon's, by the way, where a boat is still overturned in the water about like 100 yards from shore. It's awesome. It's huge.
Alpharetta dads are loving this shipping vessel story because they're like, if these things driving through a canal is hard, you should try, you know, backing up a trailer, you know, and at the launch at in Haversham
on Ivan Allen Boulevard. Like, come on, Jesus Christ. Anyway, Lady United did play actual games as they continue to try to right their ship towards 2021 a positive 2021. Joe Patrick, we actually got to see real live soccer happen over the span of about 120 minutes on Saturday against Charleston, and Charleston's like B team who had just arrived literally like 3 days before. But still, we got to see them play.
Yeah, and unexpectedly at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. When I turned on the stream, I was like, "Oh, this is at Mercedes-Benz," because I was expecting it, and everybody was expecting it to be at the training ground. So some interesting things. I'm just going to kind of run down a bullet point, and we can kind of pick up wherever you want. But I thought the things that stood out were Santiago Sosa's positioning and his general role. I mean, we knew that he was going to be that deep lying defensive midfielder. I'm going to write something about this, by the way, for the site, because it's really interesting the way that he described his role to us yesterday. But it was interesting to see his positioning in relation to the rest of the team, the way the tactics worked out. Marcelino Moreno, speaking of positioning, he was on the wing and Barco was central, which I don't think anybody was really expecting. And I might be wrong. Somebody can correct me on this. I thought he was left-footed, but that may be just me associating that with Miguel Almiron, because they've always reminded me of each other. Those long-legged Lanús attacking midfielders. But yeah, so that was interesting. Didn't expect that. Eric Lopez, my boy, scored pretty nice goal, I would say.
I was so upset. I mean, just kidding. Go 5 shots.
And interestingly, and I'm not feeling great about this at all, Joseph Martinez played in one of the 30-minute periods, which was the third one. So they basically played a 30-minute period, a short break, 30-minute period, then like a full halftime, and then repeated that. He played that third 30-minute period and then started the fourth one and came off like a couple minutes afterwards. Don't like to see that. Probably was not scheduled. So yeah, those were kind of my big takeaways. And some of the younger players, the academy players, and homegrown players that played looked pretty good, but I would just I'm pumping the brakes on that stuff big time, because again, to your point, Charleston Battery, first of all, they're a USL team in general. They're the kind of competition you would play at the USL level for Atlanta United too. And it was like their third day of training. And some of those guys who were playing at the end of it had played since the start of it. So they were playing in like the 120th minute on their third day of training. So I'm pumping the brakes on some of the stuff that we saw in the second half, but certainly good to see, good confidence builder for some of those young kids.
Yeah, I want to have people keep in mind that the main thing to focus on with things like this is to take just a little bit from the structure and the tactics and everything like that when you're going to this. If you're looking at players and certain positional things and things like that, you're probably doing this wrong, if I had to guess. Like if you're like, oh man, Zeke scored twice, here we go, MVP season coming, it's probably not going to be that. If you're like, oh man, Chop Chol looked really good, which he did, you know, it's not necessarily going to translate to the rest of the year. But what you can look at is you can look at this team and see that there was a semblance of an identity. There was a semblance of a tactical structure. There was a semblance of patterns, especially in the movement. I noticed in the movement a few times when they were getting forward, when they're getting those transitional chances, it looked very, very similar to 2017, 2018, and that felt good because we hadn't really seen those transitional chances in Mercedes-Benz Stadium over the last couple of years, not in the same way anyway. You know, so the way guys are moving is really interesting. I thought it was good. I thought it was positive. And from like the 3 things you can necessarily take away from a scrimmage, all of them were positive. So come away optimistic, not confident. That's how I'm going to describe anything you can take away from this. Optimistic, not confident.
Now, I know tactics is not the greatest thing to talk about on a podcast. It's just not the medium to really go deep into it. But I did think it was interesting with Santiago Sosa, where he was very often, when the team was in possession, he was the player that was closest to the goalkeeper. Like he was dropped deeper than the two center backs. He was dropping into like a sweeper role, essentially, although sweeping up was not his role in that position when the team is in possession. His role was to be the guy that the center backs could pass the ball back to. And he was finding some nice diagonal passes at times. He was just finding some, that's the kind of, from that position, he was able to develop the play a little bit. And I did think it was interesting when you're in that position and the ball turns over, then your center backs, who are naturally good defensive players with good defensive instincts, are in a better position to counter press. They're high up the field. They can get into those positions very quickly. And when we talked to Santiago yesterday, that was one of the things that he mentioned when he talked about his role, that he didn't first talk about playmaking or passing or picking out the diagonals or anything like that. The first thing he talked about was defending. He was like, my role is to make sure that when the ball turns over, we are, organized. I forget exactly what he said, but essentially what I took away from it was that his role is to kind of recognize when the ball is turning over and get everybody in position and make sure, they're safe on the counter and they were able to repress the ball. So I thought that was really interesting.
Yeah, no, it's gonna be interesting to kind of learn more about that position and the exact mechanics of it. It's a little bit hard to do. It's very hard to do tactics with translation, honestly.
Yeah,
it's hard to get the questions across. It's hard to get the nuance across and everything like that. But still, Santiago did a good job of explaining what it is. What I want to get in more and what I want to understand more is what are the triggers for this kind of thing. So one of the things that I've heard people talk about, and Anton kind of mentioned this too, because he was talking about his role within that back three in possession, right? There are certain instances where that back three is supposed to be triggered, where that's supposed to happen, where it's not supposed to happen. And a lot of that just kind of is based on communication, how they communicate. And Anton and Sosa both said they were trying to learn the other's language, like literal language right now to make that a bit easier. So it's to gain a better understanding of that is going to be really, really interesting, I think, going forward.
And something to point out just really quickly is Santiago, he spoke kind of good English at the very beginning when he was just kind of at the very, I forget what he said exactly. He like introduced himself or just said hello or something like that. But his accent was pretty good. And he said that he was taking lessons. So yeah, so I think that hopefully they can get that communication sorted out. I mean, not that it's an issue right now, but that they can get it sorted out very quickly. And yeah, there are very specific triggers. I mean, people who played soccer or coached soccer will know more about this even than I do, but like there are very specific triggers on the field that players will be coached to start the press. Like one of them constantly, or a common one is like when the ball is passed back to the goalkeeper or when the ball is passed from one center back to the other, like that is a trigger. That action is a trigger to start a pressing pattern. So yeah, it will be very interesting to kind of keep an eye on that and see how Atlanta United tries to exploit their opponents.
The other big thing from this, of course, and you mentioned it, Joe, was that Barco moved centrally. Marcel Marino moved out onto the wing. And at first I thought people were like messing with me. I'll be totally honest. It was really hard to tell who was who without numbers on the back in my tiny screen I was watching this game on. But it seemed correct. I mean, it was correct. Barco is moving centrally, Moreno on the wing. I don't quite understand the mechanics of that entirely yet. And it's something that we, and me especially, I'll admit to, basically said wasn't going to happen. We basically said it wasn't going to happen. And I'm still not quite sure I understand the exact reasoning. I would love to talk to somebody about that. But until we do, I don't know. It's kind of up in there. What do you think about this shift that we didn't see coming?
Well, I think for me, one of the reasons I did not see it coming was because I always thought of Marcelino Moreno as the player who defensively is more willing to get stuck in and do a lot of the dirty work. And one of the things that Barco was getting praised for in the scrimmage more than anything else was his willingness to do that kind of thing in the game. And it wasn't necessarily, a lot of people were saying like tracking back. I would not call what Barco was doing tracking back. In fact, if anything, I would say he was like more aggressive in the press, kind of going forward almost. But like defensively, in those very small moments where the game is played after possession is lost, he was just very quick to recognize those moments and jump into place, which is exactly obviously what Gabriel Heinz is going to want to see, because that's kind of what his whole system is based on. it's that attention to when the ball is being turned over and winning all those little 5-second battles that happen after those moments. That's what's going to be key for Atlanta United this year. And I thought Barco did really well in that central role. And I get, and kind of translating this to Marcelino Moreno, we've talked about his ability and his tendency to take guys on one-on-one. Like that was always his thing in Lanús in the Argentine league. He attempted more take-ons than anybody, and it wasn't even close. He wasn't necessarily always winning those. It was like kind of like 50%, but when those come off, it's going to help the team. And maybe putting a player like that in a wide area is going to be a little bit safer, put you in a better position to, win the ball back after he loses it, if he does lose it. And if he doesn't lose it, then you've got an attack going. So those could be some of the reasons, and maybe those guys will swap in and out. I'm sure they're capable of doing that. So it'll just be interesting to watch how they kind of keep this going forward.
Yeah, no, I mean, there's really no statistical indication either that this is going to be something Barco would be decent at, especially on a defensive end. I'm looking at his stats from FB Ref, and he's like 5th percentile in pressures, 10th percentile in tackles, 3rd percentile interceptions. I mean, that's very, 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 very low for an attacking mid and a winger. And so it's interesting to see him kind of shift into a more central role and put in at least the work. And I'm not sure that was necessarily ever the problem with Zeke, was the work. I think people just kind of saw him hustling, was like, oh, okay, he's doing the thing, but maybe he was just kind of bad at getting a result from that.
Well, it's interesting that you say that, because I asked Joseph about Barco in Joseph's presser. In Joseph's presser that he did the other day, like everybody was asking about him and everything. And I was like, okay, I get it. But like I asked about Barco, and he said that Barco needs to give 100%, or like he talked about, essentially, he kind of like, it was, I don't want to say it was like a shot at Barco. It wasn't like that, but he was like, he needs to essentially give more, like give 100%. If he does that, he'll show himself to be the player that everybody thinks he'll be. So it seems to me like Barco could be set for kind of a, he just has a new level of motivation this year. He sees himself as needing to exert himself like this if he wants to develop his career the way it wants to go, or he wants it to go. So I mean, it's only a good sign from what we've seen so far.
I think there's a lot to be said too about Moreno's positioning, and I think we need to kind of do a deep dive at some point on that left wing kind of position for Velez under Heinze, because I remember I got kind of blasted when I said that Zeke really couldn't play on the wing in the system. We had Peter Coates from Golazo Argentino kind of quotes at me and say, I think Barco could actually do this because of the way the left wing role works in Heinze's system. And it seems that maybe Moreno is actually a bit more suited to that, because I believe it comes central pretty often. It drops deeper, it comes central. And the way that works is pretty well tailored to what you kind of want to see from Marcelino Moreno, I think.
It seemed like that's how the balance was, where Moreno was the guy who was coming in and making runs beyond the back line as well, while Jürgen Damm was situated farther wide on the right side, which plays to his strengths as well. And that could just be a natural tendency that Jürgen Damm is going to be that kind of player who, as a right-footed winger, he just wants to get on that right foot in those wide areas and pick out crosses. But that definitely is how it played out. And I was also interested, just talking about the attack here and what we saw. Lisandro Lopez, I always pegged him to be a guy who was just going to kind of linger up top between the two center backs, play a more physical game, and be making those runs in on goal and trying to get on the ends like a poacher style striker. And what I saw from him was really more of a guy who was better in like the link up play, kind of dropping off that back line a little bit, linking up with guys like Barco, guys like Moreno, and playing some of them through at times, sometimes playing a 1-2 and making a run himself. I thought he was just better when he was coming deeper and getting himself involved in the game, because you could see the quality that a player like him has in his feet. I mean, like that's why he was such a prestigious, prolific player in Europe for so long. So I think he still has a lot left in the tank too. I mean, I don't know how many minutes he'll be able to play over the course of a full season, but I think what you saw from him was that when he does come on the field, he's going to be able to provide you legit quality in whatever kind of capacity he's able to do that.
Yeah, he ruined a couple dudes a couple times. It was awesome. Just right out around the edge of the box too, and I think it resulted in a shot that got saved and eventually maybe turned into a goal or something like that. But he megged the dude. It just his movement looked sharp. It was kind of shocking to see how fluid He looked, honestly, you see, especially striker or target guys like that look a little clunky, especially as they get older, and it didn't necessarily seem like that. So in addition to being extremely hot, Alessandro Lopez could be a really solid depth piece for this. And that's exciting. The depth and forward is again, probably the best on the team, honestly, at this point, which is crazy to think about because we were struggling so much to find those kind of things last year. But now it kind of seems like you've got it. And if Joseph does maybe have a slow start of the year, which I'm sure they're being extremely, extremely, extremely cautious. So even if you felt like a minor issue, it might be why he was pulled out of that game. But, if things come to the worst case scenario, it may not be the end of the world like it was last year.
Mm-hmm. And one other thing I want to point out, I tweeted this during the game, but George Bello is going to feast in this system. I feel like if he can stay healthy, because again, we've been talking about that left side a lot with Marcelino Moreno, Barco coming into that zone, Lisandro Lopez kind of linking up with those guys, that they're going to attract so much attention in that little kind of half space on that left channel that Bello is essentially going to be playing as a winger in this system when the team is in attack. And man, he's just going to have so much space. And when you have him on the field with those guys, like he didn't play with that group, he played with the second group for whatever reason. I don't know why, but when he's playing with those guys, he's going to add a whole nother dimension to that attack as that threat from out wide, and he can get in behind and kind of cut inside. Man, I'm just really excited to see what these guys can do once they're kind of at full strength and really going for it.
In the same way that Tata's system opened up so much space for Julian. And Julian was almost reluctant to take it sometimes because he had to stay out so far wide. But in the same way it opened up that kind of space for Julian, I think it might do the same for George. And George, frankly, is more talented. I don't think that's unfair to say. So I think you're right. It's something we said kind of from the beginning that we think Bello would do really, really well in this. And it's kind of nice to see a little bit of confirmation of that. Again, not a whole lot we can take away from that, but a whole lot of positives and a whole lot of things to be optimistic about. The other thing you can be optimistic about is we'll be right back after the quick break. So Patrick, people had questions. We have answers. The first one's going to come from Kurt today. It's a long one, but it's a good one. Hang in here. Kurt asked, a lot of our signings have mentioned wanting to use Atlanta United as a potential stepping stone to Europe. For example, Joe's sweetheart, Eric Lopez, mentioned explicitly in his first media availability as a reason he came to Atlanta. So far, we've really only helped Miggy attain that dream, with the majority of other outgoing transfers going to Mexico, South America, or within the league. In order to keep recruiting top players, how soon will we have to prove we can help other players move to top leagues? And with Newcastle looking completely pathetic right now, would their potential relegation in any way hurt how we're viewed as a stepping stone to top European teams? And I want to take this first, Joe, because I have kind of a general thought on this. And it's basically comes down to this. Brenner just came to FC Cincinnati for $13 million.
Mm-hmm.
Does FC Cincinnati strike you in any way as a club that had a reputation as being a huge outselling team?
No, not at all.
So what I think we can gather from that and a larger general trend is that is not the club at this point. The club helps. The club is obviously a part of that. The people who we have in, the personnel, coaching the team, like Heinze and others is important. But it's not necessarily the clubs at this point that are drawing players. It's the league itself. The league itself is what is being seen as a stepping stone. And the more and more we kind of get a feel of what players in Argentina are saying, what they're doing when they're talking to other players. For example, Santiago Sosa mentioning talks to multiple players about leaving the country, about leaving for MLS. The indication is that it is the league itself that is giving players this chance, right? So Atlanta United can be at the top of that pile, but they're not going to be the only one in that pile. And as long as that pile continues to grow and you see more positive examples within the league, so when you see like even a Daryl VK go out, when you see like a Brian Rodriguez go out and things like that, you get a better sense of what other players are seeing, I think.
Well said. I would have said the exact same thing. And I would say that Atlanta United kind of served as a proof of concept with Miguel Almiron in this sense, where they were able to bring in a guy who at the time when they bought him was either a record fee or near a record fee at like 8 million or something at the time. And that just that seems like pretty small potatoes, not small potatoes, but just like kind of an average DP signing now after just a few years. But yeah, he kind of served as a proof of concept. And that's why I think we were talking about this in the last episode that we recorded, the last free episode that we recorded, which was that, we should be rooting for, we being Atlanta United fans should be rooting for other teams to be selling players to Europe for big money, because yeah, it is a league wide thing. It's not necessarily like if Atlanta was just a club that was trying to do this on their own, I don't think they would have a whole lot of success, to be perfectly honest, in trying to set up that model. But if they can set up that model within the broader context of the league being this kind of venue for these players to show themselves and be the shop window league to an extent, that's a good situation to be in. And if you're Atlanta United, if you're the top, like one of the top dogs, along with LAFC and Seattle Sounders, these kinds of teams, in that context, then I think that that's great for the club. It's just great. It's great for the players. It's great for everybody. It's great for the homegrowns who are coming through. So yeah, I don't really think that with regards to Newcastle and how Almiron's doing, I think Almiron's performing pretty well there, and Newcastle is just being dragged down to other incompetencies and other ineptitudes. So I'm not really that concerned about what's happening with him. Although the only thing that might be concerning about it would be if their relegation affects any monies that would have been owed to Atlanta United. I know there was some sort of clause like that, but I think it may have only been after if they survived relegation that first year, because they bought him mid-season, then something kicked in. But other than that, yeah, not concerned about that situation.
Yeah, no, you make a good point that Atlanta United does kind of deserve some credit, at least for kind of setting the model, for kind of creating a template for the model. But again, they're not the only one following it at this point. It's really kind of changed how things work.
And Atlanta hasn't even really sold that many DPs yet. Like they sold Almiron and Pitti, obviously, and other than that, I'm trying to think. I don't think they have sold another DP. So yeah.
Well, Tito technically, right?
Oh yeah, I guess that's technically true. Yeah, he was a DP at one point.
Yeah. At one point, Lane, come back, Tito. But yeah, no, and to another point, I think that someone will swoop in for Almiron. I don't think he's going to stay in Newcastle. Quite frankly,
definitely
go down.
But there were rumors of him going to Atletico Madrid just 6 months ago or so, or maybe a year ago. I think honestly it would be a good fit. But
the thing to keep in mind is that it's all just a big feedback loop, right? The more positive things that come out of them, less more positive transfers, the more they kind of compound in on themselves, the more people come in, and it goes on and on and on. And eventually, hopefully the league kind of grows into that and continues to grow from a talent perspective as well. Just hang on, folks. Be patient. Give it like 30 to 50 years,
Yeah. We'll be set.
Be interesting to see what Atlanta United and Aberdeen's relationship looks like in 30 to 50 years. Joe Patrick leads to this question from Greg. Can you guts elaborate Can you guts elaborate any on our relationship with Aberdeen?
Yeah. So I just want to read this straight from the press release so that it's just out there again for everybody. The strategic partnership will serve to expand Atlanta United's reach globally and will be an opportunity for both clubs to share knowledge and experience during player and youth development. So player and youth development and kind of scouting, fan experience, and venue best practices. So we've heard stories about Darren Eales going over there and kind of getting a tour of the Aberdeen Stadium and what things they're doing around the community to try to get people involved with things that are going on with the club. So that's another thing. The partnership also has technical advantages by extending Atlanta United's scouting network into a new region and allowing for a development pipeline between the clubs. So that's a big one we're seeing right now with the scout, not just the scouting, but the development pipeline, right? The getting Ronald Hernandez some excuse. No, I'm just kidding. But like seriously, like loans, that kind of thing. Like that's going to be something that we continue to see. John Gallagher went to Aberdeen, performed well, came back, and was able to be able to I think that helped smooth his transition to the first team here in Atlanta by having that experience. And then one other thing I want to mention about this is that AMBSC, which is the parent company that owns Atlanta United, will have minority ownership. They bought less than 10% stake in the club. It was only at $2 million. I'm sorry, 2 million pounds. But they do have a stake in Aberdeen. So I think that that's important. I know that's something that Darren Eales pointed out when the deal went down, was that it was important for Atlanta United, or Arthur Blank, I should specify, to actually have some skin in the game with regards to Aberdeen. So it's not just like you're using them and just extracting whatever value you can out of them. It's in both parties' interest to kind of work in tandem together and grow together. So that's the technical details of the partnership. And I think that what we're seeing now is just a lot of that stuff being put into place. We've also seen youth teams have gone over and played with Aberdeen, done stuff like that. So it's really expanded some of the things that Atlanta United's been able to do.
Here's what I think the next step for that is, and you can stop me if you think this is insane, but I think that partnership continues. I don't think Aberdeen is going anywhere, but what I kind of hope we see is something very similar to what FC Dallas has set up with Bayern Munich. And it's essentially this academy agreement that allows a lot of their players to either go over on loan or just go over for training and go over for things like that. That's led to some pretty profitable things with FC Dallas and for Bayern. I mean, you look at someone like Chris Richards who went over there. They have another kid over there right now who, on loan, whose name I can't remember off the top of my head.
Brian?
Get it wrong.
I don't know.
Pennsylvania, maybe. It's one of them. Maybe there are a couple of kids right now. Justin Shea is the kid's name. That's right. And I would love to see these partnerships expand. I would love for Aberdeen to honestly be the side chick. I'm going to be honest. Like,
yes.
And that can still be very beneficial for everyone involved. But I think there are progressions beyond this. It's good that it exists, but I hope there's that future progression with the club with a little more stature and maybe a little more positives to it.
Right. Because right now, the situation with Atlanta United and Aberdeen, Atlanta United is kind of the big club in the situation. And in the one that you described with FC Dallas, Bayern Munich is the big club. And there are benefits for both sides. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're the small club or the big club. Like there's benefits for both sides. And so, yeah, I agree that it would be interesting. And I suspect that Atlanta United will enter into some sort of agreement with a bigger club. I don't know. I have no idea who it would be, but it just seems like this is the way that the sport is going, where these clubs are interconnecting across continents, across, these different competitions. NYCFCs, obviously, they were kind of the City Group was one of the kind of founder isn't the right word, but they were one of the first groups to really do this. They've got clubs in Australia, obviously the United States, Europe. The Red Bull is very similar. So yeah, that's the way the sport is going. And so at this point, it's almost just like a matter of time. I'm just like waiting to see who will be the next club to kind of join this partnership.
I do want to mention too that Dallas, I think they may still have this, but they used to have a partnership with Tigres, and at one point had like Tigres designed jerseys that looked really terrible. And it's awesome. Go look it up.
Well,
go look it up.
Speaking of that, just real quick, I mean, talking about partnerships, you might see some full-on partnering or intermixing of MLS and Liga MX. I mean, we obviously know the Campeones Cup is a new competition, but oh my goodness, what is that?
Speaking of partnerships, I am wearing my Lucid FC bucket hat.
There it is.
Shout out
there
Lucid.
It is.
Shout out Lucid. It looks way better without the headphones.
Why did that conversation trigger you to go put that on?
Because you mentioned partnerships. This is a partnership with Lucid
true.
FC, and I wanted to get my hat. This is great radio.
There have been rumors that that MLS and Liga MX could make a full-on merger at some point and just make it one league, which would be insane and kind of cool.
That's the next step. Next step.
Yeah.
We'll get into more of that later. But Darren, by the way, if you're listening, I do want to mention, I mean, there's a scarf right behind Joe's shoulder if you're watching on YouTube. It seems interesting to me, honestly, that with Darren's connections, there haven't been more kind of interactions with Spurs, to be totally honest. Maybe that's a path in the future, Darren, if you're listening. I'd be interested to know, honestly. Moving on to the next question. MTBH asked, does Heinze have to clear questions from media or will he just ignore and walk off? This is touching on something that has been a piece of conversation within the Atlanta United universe this past week, and we obviously have perspective on it, and we obviously have some insight, hopefully, on this, but we want to approach it very carefully. We want to approach it in the best sense. But
we don't need the media. That's the kind of balanced approach we're bringing to this conversation.
Screw this. Let's forget the balance thing. Welcome to the freaking Viper Pit, as we were called earlier. Viper Pit of the media here in Atlanta. Yeah, just, Sam from EAV and Joe from Brookhaven trying to make minimum wage at most. The Viper Pit. Viper Pit. Gabriel Heinze was scheduled to talk to media on Saturday after the scrimmage. That did not happen. And Doug Roberson kind of tweeted about it, and things kind of went from there, which led to a lot of questions about availability, which led to a lot of questions about Heinze's responsibility. And I think obviously me and Joe are going to have a lot of thoughts about that, but we'll try to do it without getting too inside baseball on you guys.
Oh, I'm ready to get inside baseball. I mean, and listen, like when we put together the Patreon stuff, when, everything that we've done really with Five Stripe Finals, with the idea that like we want to enhance the fans' experience of following the team. And we do that through having these conversations with players, with coaches, to try to figure out what's going on with the team and communicate that to everybody else, and vice versa, and to take people's questions and ask them to the players and the coaches, to try to get their, feedback on those kinds of things. So that's the way I see what I do, is to kind of just help fans. And so it's really interesting to me to see people say like, we don't need to hear from the coach, because first of all, it's not like a zero sum thing where it's like the more the coach or whoever, players, whatever, the more they talk to us, the worse they're going to do on the field. Like it doesn't have that relationship. That's not it. So that's one thing. The other thing is that you do want to hear from the coach and the players. Like, you want to know what's going on. You want to know the tactics. You want to know like what a coach thinks of a player, why he's playing Marcelino Moreno on the left-hand side, what he thinks George Bello could do in the system. You want to hear all, of course you want to hear these kinds of things. And it sounds like, you can say that in the moment that you don't care about that kind of stuff. And that's fine. But like, when you look back on it, Tata had tons of great insight onto the team that helped all of us understand what was going on. Tata was very open with the media as well. I will give him a lot of credit. Like, people try to say like, oh, well, Tata didn't do this either. It's like, well, actually he did. Tata was very open and honest with media. So yeah, I mean, that's kind of my thing, is that like, I can understand why you don't think that you need to hear from a coach, but I really think that when you really think about it, and you think about these things that you've heard from these guys, it is beneficial and it helps the experience of being a fan.
First and foremost, I kind of want people, and I want to ask people to empathize a bit, perhaps with Doug's position.
Yes.
On this, keeping in mind that we were told on Friday night that this interview would be happening. We waited for probably 45 minutes to an hour for a scheduled interview after this that did not come. And, in any kind of situation, I think, where you're scheduled for a meeting, that meeting goes late, and then you're told that meeting is not happening, I think there's going to be some frustration. I personally was not frustrated. I don't think Joe was. I thought it was very interesting.
I had already left. I wasn't even going to be able to do the thing anyway.
Initially, he was late because he was running an extra training session after, which I think is just about as insightful as anything. I really thought that was funny and interesting. But to a larger point, the media as a whole is essentially there to be a conduit for these people who are part of what is at its very core and at its very nature an entertainment product. And entertainment products involve characters, entertainment products involve narratives, entertainment products involve all of those things coming together through information that's delivered through interactions, right? Mm-hmm. So when we don't have those interactions, I think in general, it does lessen your experience. It lessens everybody's experience involved in this, because you don't get that insight, you don't get those connections, and you don't get a larger understanding of what the narratives and stories are around the team. I think we serve a purpose. It's maybe not the moral high ground purpose that some media kind of think they have. We're not owed anything necessarily. It's not something that
well,
will ruin the world.
We haven't been hardliners on this. We've
Right.
said about locker room access and things like that. I think that we've been ones who have been like, hey, we don't need to be inside their dressing room.
I've pushed on that some, but
I actually, there's a lot of nuance there, but we generally have been more on the side of we don't need to be invading their personal space. That's not the point of this. The point of this is just to be able to, get information out of them so we can share that with fans.
Anything we do as media, as people, going back to before I was with MLS, to writing goofy shit like Claire Navius and things like that, is to involve ourselves in the entertainment process and create community from that, right? And basic things like talking to players, talking to fans, or talking to coaches and things like that help us build that story, help us build that narrative, help us build that community. And I think some of the best coaches understand this. Like, for example, Jurgen Klopp is very big about making sure he interacts and making sure his presence is out there, and understanding that the team is there for the fans. And media, we are on not only the fan side, we're on the team side as well, which I think gets lost in a lot of cases. We are on the team side. We want the team to succeed. We want this to be fun. We want this to be an enjoyable experience. So all that being said, it wasn't a huge deal to me, but I am hopeful that those things will be kept in mind going forward.
Yeah.
Fair?
I could keep going, but I'm going to stop it there and just say good stuff. Yeah.
We're happy to have a dialogue about that too. If anyone wants to talk to us, get at us. Why not? Right? We're happy to talk about it for sure. Moving on to the next thing. Thanks for staying with us through that. Jimmy Glenn asks, so let's assume the Alan Franco signing actually happens.
Hard transition back to Alan Franco.
I'm dizzy. Hard jolt. A lot of G-force on that.
Could have rearranged these questions. Yeah.
What moves are going to be a priority come this summer window? Barco Rebella to Europe, bringing in another winger. I think we mentioned this at the top.
Yeah.
I think the team is set.
Yeah. I would not expect any big sales. Yeah. I would not expect any big sales coming this summer. The one thing I would say is maybe if a roster spot could be cleared, you could potentially see a Darwin Mateus type, get a slot on the roster midseason if you're able to adjust some things, if he's performing well or something like that. I don't know. He would give you some winger depth as it relates to this question. But yeah, I don't see a ton of movement happening with the team this midseason because the team is so locked in. It seems like they've pushed it to the limit with this allocation money that they've spent and everything. So I don't know how much wiggle room they'll even have.
Which I think kind of hints at why they were so resolute in trying to get Alan Franco in this quickly. And I kind of mentioned that I thought it was kind of weird that they were so angsty about it. Not angsty. They were just in a hurry to get this done, right? They were in a hurry to get this done. And to me, that didn't quite make sense. Again, you only have to be good for 2 months in MLS. The first 2 Champions League games are pretty winnable if you get past the first round, which is tough draw. And, all those things kind of come together to make a summer signing possible. But these preseason moments seem to be so crucial and so important to what Gabriel Heinze wants to do, that getting in a guy as quick as possible is going to be important to the overall makeup, which is why, you had this guy come in this quickly, and why you probably won't see anyone come in during the summer unless something catastrophic happens.
Agree.
Beautiful. Five Stripes with a PHY ask, what kind of coach are we looking to take? What? Another thing we need to unpack later. What kind of coach are we looking for to take over the twos, Joe Patrick? Joe, you have way more experience with this.
I do not expect this to be some long drawn out search. I believe this is just totally my opinion, but I think Henry Apollo, I don't think he followed Stephen Glass to Aberdeen. He was the assistant manager for Stephen Glass here at Atlanta United too. People have had really good things to say about him as well. And I think that he would be the perfect kind of candidate that you want, somebody who's familiar with the club, who's familiar with these players, to just continue their development and take over that role full time.
Let me ask, any chance Tony Anand is in the running for this? He seems to be such a well-liked and well-respected dude.
So it's an interesting question, and I definitely he would be, but I kind of wonder if he doesn't already see himself in like a more important role in his current role. Like I think that the being the development director at Atlanta United is a better role to be in, better in terms of just where he is in his career, than being the manager of the USL team. And he can always be the guy who can come in and manage the team on an interim basis or in an emergency or something like we saw this year. But I think it's good to have Tony just continuing in his role where he's really comfortable and has a really good relationship with clubs and everything like that. I don't think you would want to take him out of that.
Tony may continue in his role that makes him comfortable, but real quick, Joe Patrick, we're going to put you in a role that makes you uncomfortable. This is rapid fire. Will ask what you think of Abdoulaye Diop.
Again, similar to Machop Chol, like I'm just not taking a ton from the success, but I will say Abdoulaye Diop is a guy who has always been very interesting watch at the USL level. I just love his mind. Like he has a very creative kind of mind, the way he moves the ball around.
Rob asked, what would be the funniest way possible for Franco to fail his physical? And I think it's the doctor says, Franco, you're all cleared. I'm off to roller skate practice. Franco steps up, steps on a roller skate, rolls all the way down the hallway on one leg, goes down the stairs, is fine, stands up, slips on a banana peel, injures himself, looks at a dog that's been watching him the whole time and goes, don't you say it. And the dog looks and puts a paw over his eyes like he's embarrassed for Alan Franco. And that's the funniest way that could happen.
I was going to say gangrene.
What the fuck is wrong with you? Rapid fire. Doug Demidom's Burner asks, which Pokemon would best fit Atlanta United's system, and do you think it would cost us a DP slot? Joe, name a Pokemon.
Charmander.
Nice. Okay, good. Good. I was worried for a second. I
don't think it would cost a DP slot because you're probably getting in a youngster, but probably an international slot.
Yeah, like a first evolution of like a Bulbasaur or something like that. Yeah. Stamper asks, seeing that we can no longer stream games on the usual platforms, should I make the switch to AT&T TV, AT&T TV, or just move?
It's pronounced Alajuelense.
Fourth quarter COVID asks, who would be able to eat the most Chick-fil-A nuggets between Brooks, Joseph, and Barco?
For me, this is not even close that it's Joseph, but
Joseph is well practiced. Don't count on Brooks Lennon. Don't sleep on Brooks Lennon.
Joseph, he's eating chicken wings when he's watching Orlando play. He's done the whole Thanksgiving plucking at the bones. So yeah, he loves chicken.
Dr. ATL Eagle asks, is that a PhD or an MD, whatever. Dr. ATL Eagle asks, why is Independiente such jerks?
That agent, I guess, is the same guy who's represented them both times.
It's in their name. They're independent. They're lone wolves. Oh. They don't want to like
clever
hang out with people, right? Blue Guy, who somehow predicted the schedule launch like an hour before it got reported today in the Discord and freaked me out. Ask chance that Joseph starts the first match over under 50%. I say over 50%, but like under 75.
I say under 50%.
All right. Tommy asks, what is the next episode of the Franco soap opera going to be about? After the COVID episode, we find out that Franco Escobar and Sam Franco from Mouths of the South are all the same person as Alan Franco and have been the entire time. They've just been switching disguises and changing the variations of Franco to different parts of their name. Kojo asks, who is most likely to receive a red card first this season, Franco Ibarra or Gabriel Heinze?
Hilarious. Maybe Gabriel Heinze. Maybe he pulls a Tata. Although I guess Carlos Carmona got the first red card of the season in 2017, but Tata wasn't far behind.
Dr. Mantis Toboggan asks, who are your 5 breakout MLS players for this season? And this is directed at me, apparently. And this is going to be really hard to name 5 dudes
because I have no idea.
Crap. Let's see. Baldissimo in Vancouver. Ayo Akinola probably going to get a lot more minutes this year. Keep an eye on Brenner in Cincinnati. I would also take a look at someone like a Tanner Tessman might be the next guy to make a big jump from Dallas to Europe. And I'll put in Santiago Sosa. Why not? Eberhard Creative asks, with regard to Barco achieving his potential with Atlanta, have Darren and company thought about giving him a backwards hat, a semi-truck, and a Kenny Loggins Cassette and Eberhard Creative. I just want to say that sounds a little bit over the top. And that was Rapid Fire, Joe. You'll get that joke in like 5 weeks. That was Rapid Fire.
I can't wait.
Can't
wait till I get it.
It's going to be totally mediocre, but I nailed it. Joe, anything else before?
Yeah, less than 2 weeks, man. Less than 2 weeks. So the first game of the season, Tuesday, April 6th at 8 p.m. against Alajuelense. Apparently will be on FS1 according to Rob Usry's TV guide. So breaking news.
Beautiful. Thanks to Rob for breaking that for us. Hopefully both legs are, but hopefully we'll be in the stands for that other leg. You know, yeah. I'm feeling good. Go get your vaccine. You'll feel good too. Everything will all be better soon. Good luck out there. We'll see y'all later. Bye, y'all.